Oh, they have a new
Okay.
prompt that tells you now? That's smooth. Okay. They
It's-
late. So the reason I say you're not gonna like this is because after reading what you wrote and going through my own process and understanding the rules of ethics, you're technically breaking the rules within your proposal by using a derogatory racial slur to refer to yourself and others, which is against the code of ethics of the IRB, which is who you have to go through to get your research approved to start your dissertation. Does that make sense?
what do all those acronyms stand for?
So the basically it's like the internal review board or the international review board or whichever facility you're going through. It's just basically a review board at an institution. So that I typically, if you're working with a college or a school, it'll be the institutional review board. Because when you do your dissertation, you're going to have human people that you're interacting with, whether you're doing interviews or filming or whatever the case is. So there's a rule of or code of ethics, and the reason I say I don't think you're going to like what I'm going to say is because you can do the research and everything you said. The problem is the way that you're discussing it. And you seem very big on voice. However, it is a bureaucratic process. So your voice is less important to them. What's the most important is that they keep these groups protected because research is racist. And it would be unfair for you to be able to refer to yourself and others as the N word, but a white person can't, because then there's a power imbalance. And also, people within the protected group of Black people and other forms of that don't want to be referred to as such, it can be seen as psychological stress inducing language if you present it that way. Now, this is the point here. So if you rewrite the proposal to discuss outside of yourself the research and the importance of using this language in studying, whatever within that conversation you want to study, that's fine. But a part of the PhD or the EdD or whatever doctorate you want to pursue is that you're going to have to give a statement of bias, acknowledging your intersections and your bias. And you're also going to have to give a statement about protecting groups and how the goal of your research is not to induce any harm through using this language. And I already know you're gonna have to do that because I've gone there. When you get in school, they're gonna give you a whole class where you have to go through that process before your dissertation. So I'm already telling you, if you send that letter and they're gonna be like, oh heck no, this is problematic. But if you rewrite it in code swap, you can do all the things you said you want to do. Does that make sense?
It does. I guess
And I know you don't like that, do you?
it's not that I don't like it because I do understand it. I'm The issue is code swapping. That's the
Yes.
problem.
I totally get that part.
And then what happens if I'm an advocate for protecting those who do it? That's why I'm doing, I don't know if you've been seeing that survey that I've been sharing.
No.
Okay, so I have to send it to you. I'm collecting this
Mm.
survey because I had a the other studio visit the other day. They didn't say anything that presented itself as I should doubt myself,
Mm-hmm.
but I started to experience some doubt, even though I'm always talking to people, scrolling on the timeline. People are using the word all the time. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not like what I'm discussing is something new. Curtis
Mm-hmm.
Mayfield was talking about he was the nigga in the alley. So this is not like I'm
Yeah.
not new. So I have this survey because my friend was like, why don't you make a survey? So the survey is essentially me asking people whether or not they use the word. If so, when
Mm-hmm.
did they begin using the word? And then
Mm-hmm.
the only do I have a drop down menu? I don't have, it's all fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are filling in the blank, whether they're trying to be funny or not funny, because I told them to honor their own cadence and just be honest. Some people
Yeah.
are putting their racial identity as nigga.
And see, the way you said that is different than your proposal and how it reads. So you
Hmm.
just need to generalize that conversation, be specific in the use of the word and what you're trying to extrapolate from your main inquiry. And then you just need to present it as an outsider, just because that's how it works. You like if you send something into the institutional review board, that you identify as, you're already going to have a challenge because your research, like the whole goal of the board is to alleviate any bias as much as possible. So you identifying as a nigga and then you doing these surveys, that's extremely biased,
Okay.
especially if you want to talk about code swapping and the importance of voice and language as an in-group member.
So I have to, so what you're saying essentially is a reason why I made the survey, because I realized I needed to, I mean, I didn't word it that way, but I realized I needed to step outside of myself, because it was seeming like no matter what I say, it didn't really matter, because a lot of people just don't believe me, especially like Black British or like people who just don't use the word. They're like, I don't believe you. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what, like, you think I came up with this? You think I just popped out the womb and I just decided to start saying nigga? Like, someone taught me.
Yeah.
But I realized, like, with the survey, I can create numbers, I can create diagrams, and it
Yeah.
becomes like more mathematical and scientific than it does
Mm-hmm.
theoretical. And I think up until this point, a lot of the conversations that I have with people, they always say, you know, this is very theoretical. But I'm always arguing like this is
Mm-hmm.
not theory. Like, I am literally pulling my observations. These are like anecdotes from not only myself, but from other people. But I realized I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have the standing proof. Like, I didn't have anything to show. And right now I'm working to, I think I have like about 40, 45 submissions so far. I'm gunning for my first
Mm-hmm.
100. So, and then it's open to all races. So that's another thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not even like people were asking me like, oh, what if I identify as white? I was like, I implore you, like, please, please, you know, fill this
Mm-hmm.
out so I can figure out what the data is doing and how I could begin to organize it, because it's seeming like no matter what I say, the belief is only Sunny says nigga. And I'm like, no,
Yeah.
I'm just the only nigga in the space saying nigga publicly, because when I'm with my mini cohort, everyone's saying nigga. But when they come into the
Mm-hmm.
classroom, a lot of people code swap. I don't code swap.
Mm-hmm.
So because I don't code swap, a lot of people just think it's just me. I'm like, no, I'm just not
Mm-hmm.
afraid of the classroom. What are you gonna do? Monique in a video, she's like, because I guarantee you can't beat me up. So it's like, um,
But that's the issue with the doctorate, is that you're going to have to code swap because they have set up an expectation. And you already know that college is racist and those systems are racist. And it's just, that's just unfortunately, I mean, unless you're going to figure out a way around the board, I mean, that's going to be real tough. And your survey also has to get approved by the board. That's the other thing. And they're going to diagnose if what kind of waiver you might need based on the questions you're asking, if they're trauma induced, like I said. So for some people, you have the N word there that might make them break down
trauma
crying.
inducing.
Listen, I'm just telling you, that's part of equity. I get your whole point. I'm just saying the proposal is the only time you would have to code swap. Everything else, you could do your own thing, but you have to get your foot in so that they've
Okay,
already approved
understood.
what you're going to do. And then you can do your artist thing.
Okay, so um,
You got to trick them.
right, I can do that. Um, I
Does this
can.
make sense? Are you sure?
No, it does. No, it does.
Mm-hmm. Because you're a part of a protected group. So they trying to protect you from being labeled an N-word. They've been doing that for 100 years.
Ironically, they've been calling us one for 100 years.
They have. And it was good for business because when they let the slaves do sharecropping, slavery 2.0, and then they allowed black folks to go to college and they created tuition because they didn't want black people to go to school for free,
Yeah.
all these things popped up. So there's a whole process to it, you know? One of the
Okay.
deals was, okay, you can't use this word. You can't call your students this. We might even make it a hate crime in some places. So you're going to be dealing with those precedented scenarios that have nothing to do with you.
Okay.
That's all it is. So code swap, trick them. You have to speak as an outsider, use a linguistic about the etymology of the word and how you're studying its use and people's acceptance or lack thereof, and then mention code swapping and how one of your goals is to address code swapping and how it might be actually a violation of freedom of expression in some ways, especially when you're trying to get to a conclusion that might have roadblocks such as the IRB. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
All right. Because even with my research, I'm dealing with a little bit of that. Granted, I'm just asking people about narrative, storytelling, their identities, their intersections, and how those things make them who they are. And what I found is out of 90 Asian people I've interviewed, only 2 of them identified as a person of color.
No, it doesn't. It's not.
That's
It's
crazy.
not. It's not crazy when you think about it. I actually had this whole discussion the other evening because I was sharing what I shared with you,
Mm-hmm.
and someone said POC, and I was like, oh, that's not real. I feel like conversations could be more engaging if you could just tell me where you're from, like where are you from?
Mm-hmm.
And people start telling me that they're Punjabi, they're from Fiji, they're from the Philippines. I said, no, the conversations immediately has just now become significantly more generative than me saying I'm
Mm-hmm.
Black and then the 4 of you saying I'm POC, because that doesn't let me know anything about you. It
Yeah.
just lets me know that some person behind the computer came up with a term, labeled you that, and then you start identifying, which is why that quote, where we've been is where everyone is going, but
Mm-hmm.
only if you allow itself to perpetuate itself, because Black
Mm-hmm.
people were not Black, someone labeled us Black, and then we
Yeah.
didn't really have a choice, so we identified as that. Right now people have a lot more agency than they allow themselves credit for, so people
Yeah.
walking around here reposting these like Instagram posts that are designed by graphic designers and people using Canva, POC, and they love the post. I call it civil rights couture, because it's like, what
Mm-hmm.
does this even mean? And
Mm-hmm.
you got 50 people in a room saying that they're POC, but 49 people are from 49 different places, like,
Yeah.
and then there's me. So
And just for the record, they identified as white, by the way. So
I mentioned that too, because then we were sitting. I was in a different group, and somebody was talking about the minority groups in South Africa, but they
mm-hmm.
were referencing the native people. And then I was like, how? I said, are you showing me like census data? Because how are the native people the minority? I said, they're actually the majority, but that minority have more access to resources. I said, but we're using language to continue to
Yeah.
perpetuate something that as it isn't actually true.
Mm-hmm.
I like progressive language.
See, but if you use that kind of language instead of what you have in your proposal, that's how you trick them.
Oh,
You see what I'm saying? You have to make it a study of representation, identity, and language in the way that we speak about each other and refer to ourselves, and then you pull that in. And this is what my main inquiry is based around the N-word. However, this is the problem overall globally and how I'm addressing it. Now I'm going to focus in so that my research isn't broad. You see what I'm saying? You don't like that?
no, I do. I guess I need to actually like sit down, if you have time to help me. I'm gonna, obviously that's why I recorded this.
Yes, I got time. Someone helped me, and I'm one of those kind of black folk where it's like someone did it for me, I'm gonna do it for you, and then hopefully you do it for somebody else when you're done.
That's exactly how I feel. People be
Yeah.
DMing me all the time, and I'm like, yeah, do you have a time for a quick IG chat? And I'll just be on the phone with random people. This girl followed me on TikTok. Let me see. I'm about to tell you where she's from. Hi, Sunny. It's Jasmine from TikTok. She lives in Indonesia, and she's
Mm-hmm.
seen my page, and she said she's interested in the Royal College of Art and wanted to know if I could share any information with her. I messaged her and I was like, yeah, let me know what the time difference is so we can coordinate. Like, I genuinely don't mind.
Yeah, so I don't mind. That's not a big deal. But what is your main inquiry? That's my question to you. What are you actually trying to answer?
Yeah, I don't have a question yet. I'm looking for it. I actually wrote that. I think I've said this like multiple times. I said, I don't, I'm hoping, what I'm praying on, what I'm truly manifesting is through my interest of exploration,
Mm-hmm.
a question pops up. I don't know. I just know that I'm interested in something. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
fascinating, but because of the spaces that I occupy, I consistently find myself having to answer to someone. See, if I
Yeah.
just make a meme on Instagram, social media, and just post it like at dawn I ride with my niggas or something funny like that. No one questions it. It gets reposted. People laugh about it. No one's saying like, Sunny, you need permission. Nothing. But if I make an art piece or I write about it in an essay, I automatically have to answer to some invisible people. So I don't in my studio visit I had the other day, he said, it seems like he's like, you're not really asking for permission. I said, I'm not. I find myself that a lot of people in the spaces that I occupy, they're asking for permission, and that's their question. Their question is, can I exist here? My statement is, I already am here. And so I think that's where a lot of the frustration or tension comes in, because people keep asking, well, what's your question? I don't have a question. I'm here. I'm vibing. Like I made it this far just stating things and having an interest in something and being curious about stuff. Whereas I find that a lot of my cohort, the things that they're doing are incredibly fascinating. But they're asking for permission to make fascinating things that they're interested in.
You know, you've talked to me like this before, especially when we were in the gallery and you're like, we didn't ask, we just put our art up on the wall. And maybe what you're addressing indirectly are systems of power in the ways that they stifle conversations, creativity, and also self-expression. And what it sounds like I hear you saying is that if people were more open to that, we might surprise ourselves as a culture when it comes to the things people actually are willing to accept within the spaces they occupy.
Yeah,
that's what it kind of sounds like you're saying.
Essentially, I feel like my undergraduate thesis like kind of touched on it, where I was essentially saying like maximize your agency, just take up space. Because like Monique said, so because I guarantee you can't beat me up. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, I don't to this day, as scary as it is, I haven't made it this far asking people if I can be in the space. I just said, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm interested in. Does your institution have the resources I need to get done what I want to do? Yes or no? Some say yes, some say no. That's how I see it. I don't necessarily see it as, hey, Royal College of Art, can I come to your school? I more so see it as, does your school host resources for me to explore what I'm interested in? Yale said no. RCA said, we have the resources you need. That's how I see it. I don't see it as, do I have permission to be here? And I think it all comes down to mindset. So if you're constantly asking people like, can I make this? The answer is always going to be, no. The answer is going to be no. Because every institution they go to, they tell you, even at RCA is so conservative. It's so conservative. It's so like, it's low key is.
Uh-oh. You make that face. I mean, you about to say something crazy. Is it Nazi Germany or what you about to say?
No, I thought Otis was conservative, but Otis is, compared to RCA, it's significantly more liberated.
Otis is crazy anyway. Everybody quitting, so. And they having a Palestinian-Israel conflict on campus that they can't contain, so. But I have a few things for you then, based on what you just told me. One, look into transdisciplinary education.
I do not like that word already.
It's a great word. This is up your alley.
People come talk to me and they think I do hold a posture of openness, and I aim to be open because I like to critically think. But some of these words sound like civil rights couture.
Oh my, no, this one's definitely not that.
What's the word?
Transdisciplinary education.
I have to make,
and it's just,
I got to make up my own words because this is a wild word.
Well, this is what I was about to tell you. And as a part of that, It involves different ways of allowing multiple perspectives and conversations within spaces in a way where you teach people to be open and have cultural humility when it comes to critically thinking. So, cultural humility meaning no matter who they are, who you're talking to, whether they're a KKK member or whatever, you are going to use your critical thoughts to listen to their story and better understand their perspective instead of rejecting it and deciding that your side's the right side and that they're basically wrong. The
I mean,
transdisciplinary part is about using different modes of communication and philosophies to teach the same principles so that students aren't stuck with the mono way of thinking about a situation, which will equip them better than you just saying, hey, just be liberal because this is good for everyone. It's teaching all the perspectives so that they can fuse them together and create their own outcomes as students and learners. Does this make sense?
yeah.
This sounds kind of like what you're talking about because you just, like you said, like people asking for permission and all of that, and like people being shocked by your use of the N word or whatever the case is. That's a cultural humility issue. They're not taking your perspective as a researcher and person with the lived experience into thinking critically about the discourse you're providing in academic space.
If for the phrase cultural humility, would I be practicing cultural humility, or is it people who are not being open to other people's culture that they're being?
You already are practicing cultural humility because you listen to what people have to say and you turn take and you give your opinion and you don't necessarily tell people they're wrong. You just provide them with the knowledge you have, right?
Yeah, but I looked up humility and it says the quality of having a modest or low view of one's importance.
Yes, but with cultural humility specifically in the academic space, it's more so about your interactions with other people and how you accept their pain and trauma and how that might manifest as well. For example, the white guy who screams at you and says, I hate you, nigger, you black nigger, go back to Africa. Maybe he got jumped in the hood and robbed once at a Wingstop and he's not really racist. Maybe he's just fear manifests as either violence, flight, racial slurs, or all kinds of other things. So it's the concept of acknowledging that other person's existence in the space as a better way of understanding what they're saying and why they might be saying it. Does this make a little bit of sense?
Yes, it does.
And it's one of the number one cures for microaggressions.
Macro.
You said macro?
Everyone always says micro. I said if it was micro, it wouldn't have such a significant impact.
You're right. You're right.
Culturally, I don't like the
and the other
word.
thing is, if you go within those spaces, it will allow you to coin your own terms as well. You could just make up words that you want to use, and that's what everybody else did. They're all made up.
They are, which is why I'm like, just let me say it. One of the questions hold on, let me see. I'm receiving everything you just said. How people put words together, like transdisciplinary education and cultural humility.
Do you also hate? Do you hate intersectionality as a term as well?
I think because people use it and they misuse the word often, it lowers the value. It becomes a colloquial. So you can have a definition, you can have a definition, and like everyone has a different definition. And I personally feel like when everyone has a different definition of the same word, that's where hiccups arise. So when people are having a conversation, I could say intersectionality and you're thinking we're on the same page, but then the next word out of my mouth, you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. So for me, some of these words, they're how people are defining them, their value, it decreases because a lot of times people are using these words and everyone is not on the same page.
And that's just because you're smart though, and you know that Kimberly made it up for a specific reason, especially how it relates to Black women, and people don't get that. They think it's for like gender fluidity or something.
It's not. Like even when I use it, in my brain, literally every time I see it, I'm literally thinking of a drive like a like when cars are driving, I'm thinking of intersection.
Mm,
I don't think people have that image in their head. Not that they're supposed to, because there's no
yeah.
whatever, but that's how I think of it. So intersectionality for me just means like at some point in time our paths cross, but it doesn't mean we're in the same path. Like when people are like, "Oh, me too," I'm like, "Yeah, at some point we intersect, but I'm going a totally different direction."
I
And
get
it's
you. And that ain't, see, and that's, I would even argue that that's kind of far from the woman who created its intentions.
probably.
Because it was all within critical race theory. Her point was, okay, yes, I'm a black woman and I deal with this in America. You're a white woman. You're also a woman. However, we intersect at our race as two women. Me as a black woman, I have a different experience than you as a white woman, but we're both women. So there's an intersection between our identities. However, there's still a difference when you consider critical race theory and how things come to you based on how you look. That's kind
Yeah.
of what her goal was in that.
Even that alone, critical race theory, I'm like, what is how theoretical is it?
The only reason it's theoretical is because people can deny the reasons why they do things to you. They can say, "Oh, it's not because you're black, Sonny. It's not because of your hair. It's not." Then they could just lie. So you can't really prove someone's intentions unless they write it down or you have it documented verbally somehow. That's the problem with that. So it has to be a theory. Otherwise, the government would be acknowledging that racism is real.
That sounds like psychological abuse. That's what
It
that
is.
sounds like.
It is. But also time and place. You know, the people who were writing that stuff were trying to prove that stuff was happening to black people because they were black. So that's the whole
Mm,
the theory part is just because it's old. And for some reason, no one's developed a new concept to talk about what's actually happening. We just study shit from the 50s and the 60s. Or we read Phyllis Wheatley on the slave ship asking the Christian God why he's forsaken her and how many times should she pray to be freed. Like, you know, not to go there. I'm just saying.
yeah. Yeah. Because
That's
when
why Kanye
I'm
West said slavery is a choice. That's what he meant. You could jump off that ship, you could kill yourself.
I knew exactly what he meant when he said that.
Yeah, but you know, people are not thinking that hard because they don't have cultural humility.
It's the humility part that's throwing me off.
It just means shut up and listen. That's what it means.
I would, and that's another thing I discuss is there's all this like quote unquote academic speak.
Hmm.
I can imagine myself in a talk just saying, just shut up and listen. I'm not going to say
Yeah.
cultural humility. What is what does that even mean?
In my
Just
class, I say, don't be mad at the culture people, or don't be mad at the person. Be mad at the culture that they're demonstrating. You mad at this racist white person? His parents could have raised him that way. That's conditioning. Why are you mad? It's the same concept, but that's how I present it to my younger students that don't have any concept of that kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah. All these um there's too many when I'm listening to these like talks and lectures and stuff, there's too many
Hmm.
everyone's taking the roundabout. Just hop on the island. Like just hop, just get on it.
And this is the point. When you get your doctorate and you talk from a linguistic standpoint about the N word, you do your surveys, you present your research, you talk about the system, you talk about the censorship and the erasure of natural voice within these spaces as a way to fit in or whatever. You can, for your dissertation, make a module. You can make a course. You could make you can make all kinds of things. I'm writing a short story, I'm doing a music video, and I'm writing a research essay.
Mm.
So my other friend is making a curriculum to show people how to best teach a concept that she created that she believes people should adhere to as a way to be better thinkers. And it sounds like you're kind of in that boat. So you could literally make a module or a curriculum as a part of your dissertation. And you could teach people all that, like when you're talking to me, like, well, we should just do this, or we should consider that, or we need to think about people who don't have access to language. How would they understand this? That's all you could do all that.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying? Your
Yeah.
dissertation doesn't only have to be research or surveys or documented videos. It can be other stuff. You could write a fiction book.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Actually,
People might not tell you that, but you can actually do those things. Everyone just writes the essay because it's easy.
oh, I mean, I still want to write because I want some publications, but
You like to write too, but yes. But you don't have to. You could do a lot of things. You could do a live blue eyes, brown eyes experiment and just document the data. Like, and you're like your own experiment, not Jane Elliott's, but anyone similar or whatever.
okay. Well,
Especially to prove that people identify as nigger. And if you're getting disbelief from that, I mean, prove, like you said, you want to prove it, do a live seminar, have a conversation, set up. That could be your dissertation too, as long as you document everything properly. That's all they care about is the statistics.
and that's what I'm collecting right now. This is my
And don't
first.
forget, there's qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods. So you're going to have to identify that on your application for your dissertation. So you might want to
Okay, yeah,
think about that.
that's why I started doing what you just said when I was talking to my friend. Even though I had thought about it in passing, but I never just right after we had that conversation, we spoke for like 3 hours. I went right to my studio and I was just like, I was like, oh, I'm gonna do it tomorrow. Then I thought, today, I'll just do it right now. He was mentioning quantitative and qualitative data, and I thought, okay, I think right now the only quantitative data right now I have is age. I really wanted to include age. But a lot of the questions are they're not quantifiable right
Then
now.
you're doing mixed methods because you have quantities and then you have qualitative data. So that's mixed methods. That's what you're doing. You're mixing them together.
Yeah. I want more numbers though, because I have to figure out what it would be numerically, but I'm going to share it with you. But it would be nice to perhaps meet again when you're not doing laundry. After I listen, after I listen to this, I'm going to like look at the transcript and like write something and see how to integrate it to figure out, take your suggestions of the language, because it only has to be, I think it's like 1,000 words. And if I could get a succinct 1,000 words where people are, I think mostly I want people to be curious enough to say yes. That's the point I want to get to. Curious enough to say yes.
You need to remember the key crucial way to get people to be curious is to read like a writer and write like a reader.
Read like a writer and write like a reader.
Yes. So what is your reader going to need to better understand your stance? Because your stance involves a lot of information people might not have. So how can you translate yourself without code swapping in a way that you still feel honest and true to your voice, but also acknowledge the things the reader might need to better understand what you're talking about?
Oh, so they need some research.
Because if you're just writing for yourself because you have a problem with the world, even if you're trying to help others, that could be a way of limiting access to your intellectual properties.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So just think about that while you're writing. And then when you're rereading and editing, it's like, if I wasn't myself, even if I was an academic who maybe is not immersed in this culture, would I be able to either one, generate thoughts from reading this, or two, have enough interest that I want this person to come here and pursue this research?
Right.
The people in my application, they said they had no idea what the hell I was talking about, but they said it was interesting because of all the different mediums I said I wanted to include. And they said that that's what they want. They want some diversity. And also you can make your specialization. So make sure, even if your counselor, whenever you're enrolled, doesn't tell you, mostly every school, for the most part, you can make your own specialization.
What does that mean? Like outside of the
So your
research paper?
doctorate will say what you want it to say. So for example, right now I'm in the education program and the degree is referred to as multicultural studies and anti-racist curriculum development. But I can change the name of that to whatever I want. And there's these senior classes called specialization. So if I'm going to change the name to something and say I'm a specialist in this, with those specialization classes, I basically create the name of those classes. I provide them with all the content that I want to read, which will be good for you because you can low key just skip line a little bit. And I tell them, hey, this is what I want my degree to say. Because you read a bunch of books already. So you could just propose for your class all the books you read already and just write a new paper. They don't know what you looked at.
Um,
You see what I'm saying?
the only thing I heard everything you said. My brain went, my degree could say anything, and I was trying to figure out how do I get the N-word on there.
See, now that's another one of those code of ethics. I mean, is the school gonna get shut
But
down
it's
if they allow
my
you to?
degree.
I hear you. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just telling you. I mean,
You
that's
want to
just what it
know?
is.
I had a conversation earlier today, and my friend was like, he said, because I was telling when I was at a show last night, and like this older lady came up to me, and she surprised me because she was like, "Oh yeah," she's like, she's like, "I don't know if it'd be weird or not if I come up to you and ask you like, oh, I follow you on Instagram," and I was surprised because she's like older woman, she's in the painting program. I was like, "What?" She's like, "Yeah," she's like, "I just felt like I needed to know you." And my friend today was like, "It's interesting." He was like, "White people are so fascinated by you." I was like, "I don't think it's a." I was like, That's. It seems that to be true, but it's also kind of frustrating because sometimes it makes me feel like I'm not doing something right. If if white people are significantly fascinated, I said I don't know if they're fascinated or intrigued by my audacity. And then he said for Black people, he said a lot of Black people may have a little bit of fear because they're trying to figure out like how I'm going to get away with what I'm doing, because Black people know exactly what I'm doing. So
Yeah.
a lot of theirs is just kind of like, dang, is she going to get away with this?
You got to play the game, they call it.
Yeah. So me, I'm just trying to figure out like, how am I going to get away with it? And it's not even like I'm trying to get away with anything. I think for me, I'm not trying to get away with anything.
You're just being yourself.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
Trust me, I'm the one person who understands because I'm kind of similar to you. The only difference is I don't put myself out there like that. I'm more of I wait to the end and then it's too late to say anything. You know, I'm more of a setup kind of person. You're not even trying to think that hard. You just like, look, I'm gonna do it at the end anyway. So what's the point in coming in the beginning and acting like I'm not? And I get that part.
Yeah. It's you know what it is? I during quarantine I watched so many like lectures and artist talks, and I even joined some that were virtual. And I thought, I really appreciate how the people who have come before me laid such a strong foundation. There's so many people I couldn't even begin to name all of them, right? And but what I did notice for some is because of the time period, they're just very poetic, but not poetic. Sometimes I feel like they had to become poetic out of survival. So,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
it's a form of code swapping.
Yes. And so, but that's what I realized, because I used to think like, wow, like how are they like, you know, their thinking is, if you read it, it's very much like if you know, you know, it's impactful, it's powerful. But I also realized that the poetics of it all are a method to surviving. And I'm interested in using the poetics of that, but also shifting out of surviving to just to liberating, to like liberation. And I feel like that happens in the mind first.
It does, and I have a suggestion for you for your proposal, especially. So, if that's your whole point, maybe you need to reference like Paul Laurence Dunbar.
I don't know who that is.
So it's a Black gentleman, famous poet, very famous, like extremely famous. He has a poem called "We Wear the Mask," and it starts off, "We wear the mask that grins and lies. It shades our cheeks and hides our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile, with torn and bleeding hearts we smile. Nay, let the world dream otherwise, in counting all our grins and sighs. Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask," so on and so forth. And the whole point is, exactly what you're talking about. His whole thing is, unless we put a mask on as Black people and hide behind the system, no one will see us or accept us.
Mm-hmm.
And he's saying that that's what we do and that's what we have to do to be successful, and that it's unfortunate. And I think if you preface it, maybe using some of that kind of literature, it will better reinforce the fact that this has been a prolonged issue, but also to encourage them allowing you, or not allowing you, but being open to what you're presenting as far as like natural voice and use of the N word and all those things in between. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You know what I always think about? I remember I was sitting down and I was like, a lot of times, sometimes, oftentimes, I feel like with Black people, we're fighting each other, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I always imagine myself like being in a coliseum and like there's like this huge group of non-Black people watching us, and all the Black people are in the middle of the coliseum, and we're yelling and we're laughing and we're fighting and we're just doing whatever we want to do, but we're in the middle of the coliseum.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point I like stop and I look around and I'm thinking, what the heck is going on? And I turn around and for some reason, like everyone, I guess like telepathically like understands. It's like my brain sent a signal to let everyone know, like,
Mm-hmm.
wait, what's going on? And we all turn around to look at who's watching us. And we're like, wait a minute. And it's just like, we're like, boo. And everyone in the seats are like terrified now because we can see them watching us. And it's like, we
Mm-hmm.
realize we can exit the Coliseum. There's more of us than there are of them. And, oh, here we
I'm
go.
getting on my computer. I'm at my house, so I'm switching off my phone.
Okay.
All right. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Recording in progress.
All right. I got you.
But I just always imagine everyone turning around and is that a camel? What is that?
That's Juan, the camel. He was a really cool dude.
That's actually really cool. I feel like I would run before I touched the camel first. I think I'd stare at it for a little bit.
They're trained to give kisses and take selfies. So they're really cool. They're all rescued from the Middle East and everything. So
wow, that's like even horse.
I wasn't trying to throw.
That threw me off. I was like, well, that's not a horse. Yeah, but I always imagine myself turning around and being like, boo. And they're always spooked. And that's kind of like how I treat, the spaces that I'm in, like a playground for me to just be like, boo.
Mm.
And they're always like, whoa, did she say that? Or did she do that? Or she's really that loud? Or yes. Or, one big thing is like hair. It's me.
Oh, yeah.
And my friend Shayla, she's my flatmate, but we met in LA and we're both Black Americans. But like she changes her hair as much as I change my hair. And honestly, her cadence of hair switching is like faster than mine. I'm trying to keep up now. And I just love that so much because she does all different types of styles and she reminds me of like me, we're just doing our hair. But when we show up in spaces, it's a spectacle. And it's like, there's really no way for me not to be a spectacle. If I show up in braids, one of my classmates, he was like, can I touch it? I was like, yeah, if you send me some money. And he just started busting up. And I was like,
crazy.
Yeah, he started like busting up. He's real cool. But I was just like, yeah, send me some money. And I think when I'm in these spaces, they think I'm kidding. But in my brain, you know what I'm calculating? Reparations. Anytime I can. POC, white people, if you ask me something, people in my DMs, there's this guy I was like, I don't know if you've seen it, but I was watching Save the Last Dance and I was like critiquing it in my story. And this guy, like I met, he messaged me and he goes, oh, that was my sister's favorite film growing up. And I was like, I bet it was. I was like, how does she identify? I knew she was white. He goes, I never asked her. I said, I put BFFR, be fucking for real. I said, your sister's white. Like, what is your sister? And he's like, oh, well, she's white. I'm like, of course. I was like, this is a white fantasy movie. This is not, this is not a Black film. And then he started asking me about another show, like The Get Down. And I told him, I was like, I'm watching Save the Last Dance. I'm not talking about another movie. And I was like, if you want to talk about it, I was like, you can send me some money. And he was like, I don't have any money, but I can send you this. I'm like, I'm not like
He
my
was
brain,
sending his
like
Amazon login.
I was like, I'm not like, that's not, I think it's fascinating that you can be talking about one thing, especially if people see that you're very invested and interested in it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'm biased, unless you're Black, because I know that we can have this conversation and I won't feel exhausted talking to you. Don't bring up a new topic without extending some pounds. Like, it's just not
That's
going to
smart though.
happen. I think more Black people should do it. And I think the way I speak to white people too, I'm not being disrespectful, but I'm talking to them like I would talk to anyone, really. Like, there is no, I think sometimes people just hear white, so they elevate how they speak
Mm-hmm.
for some reason. And I'm like, they are human beings. They are not, they're just, they're humans.
Mm-hmm.
So I talk to them like human beings. Like, I'd be like, be fucking for real. They'd be like, whoa, she's talking to me.
Okay. This made me think then. You should look into some Fred Moten. Do you know who that is already?
I just wrote them down in my notebook.
Yeah, you should look into him. And I met him a couple times. He actually came to Otis and was a guest lecturer once and did like a reading. And he is anti-code swap. Like I have a colleague right now who just got hired at SMC, Dr. Sterling, Black dude from the hood, ex-gang member, went to jail for robbery. His brother was murdered by the police, unfortunately, like in front of him. And he's very conscious, and he got the struggle that we all had. Like the
Yeah.
real struggle, not the fake
Yeah.
struggle. And Fred Moten was one of his dissertation advisors, and Fred Moten does not code swap
Because
at all.
why?
He uses the N word in class and everything.
I bet
And
he
Dr.
feels free
Sterling
as
was telling me
hell.
this because he was talking to the students last week, and I was like, "You call your students the N word? And that's not my thing." And I was asking him about it. And he was like, "Well, Fred Moten taught me to just be myself." And he's like, "I'm Black and smart enough to have a PhD, so why shouldn't I say nigga when I'm with my students and they Black?"
I'm
And
just
I just thought
saying,
about you, and I was like, maybe you should look at some Fred Moten.
I'm going to do that because do you know what was slowly started teaching me to be more comfortable in my skin when I started working in hospitality. When I began working in hospitality, so many people were like, don't work in a restaurant. You're not going to like it. I got in there. I loved it. Hospitality, those were my best gigs. Anytime interacting with people, because I found that my favorite word for talking about how people communicate is cadence. Everyone's cadence is different. I have enough patience and practicing patience to meet people's cadence when they're communicating. I meet people who talk slower, who think fast, who are excited. Whatever, I just meet them where they're at because I'm interested in the conversation. I also, when people would come in, the only reason why you get off of work and you feel exhausted and drained is because you spent the whole day cosplaying somebody else. That's why people get to work. You're like, hi, welcome, how are you? Blah blah blah. People will walk in, like, I would say like, what's up, or I give them a compliment or something. Genuine, or like, hi, welcome. It wasn't. I was not exerting extra oomph and energy. I was talking to them like they were a human being, and then they felt comfortable because they're like, oh, this is a human being. You can always tell when someone's like, hi, how are you? And then you're tired at the end of the day. I don't have
I have
time.
a fake work voice, so I get it. I'm like, sorry to bother you. I'm like, I'm in the meeting, like, I'm either not going to talk or put on my fake voice. I feel like they don't deserve my true self.
What's going on?
I don't know. I've been this way. I have that classic double consciousness, So I'm like the conforming nonconformist. It's really unfortunate.
Why do you think that is?
Because I feel like if I just pretend, it'll be easier for me to get to the top, and then it'll be too late for them to stop me. That's my whole thing. I'm like the Trojan horse. That's how I feel on the inside, at least.
You know how I feel?
I don't.
I don't feel like a Trojan horse. I feel like I feel like classic example. I knew people when they were first getting their DMV license, or
Hmm.
just like when they get a new job, if they smoke weed, they would just
Hmm.
go to the interview or the job high initially off rip,
Mm.
because you go high initially off rip while you're working. No one's ever gonna wonder like what's going on with this person because they
Yeah,
started off like that.
that's crazy
They
though.
started off like that. I don't have the gall to do that,
That
but
crazy.
it I realized like okay, like if it worked for them, then it worked for them. So if they do come to work high, no one's thinking like, oh, this person is like high. They're just thinking like that's kind of like their temperament,
Hmm.
especially if their eyes aren't low or red or anything. They're just like, oh, the person's chill. I
Hmm.
don't have the gall enough to do that, but
That's shocking.
yeah, that's like pretty heavy. Like I like an interview. I need to have my wits about me. You ever watch documentaries about like jazz musicians and how like early on
Yeah.
they used to frown upon people who would be getting high? They
Yeah.
like they was like frowned upon. That's
Yeah.
kind of how I feel when I'm, especially when it's time for me to think, like like for real think. I don't necessarily
Hmm.
want to like, and I actually understand why people. I watched a short snippet on YouTube. I actually understand why people smoke cigarettes because they still have their wits intact about them, so they can like smoke and they can still talk. Whereas when you get high, the conversation starts to get a little spacey and you kind of forget, and now you're high. So,
Hmm.
but
Now, how do you feel about the whole concept of so you mentioned jazz here, so and hopefully this don't sound like I'm changing the topic, but I think about artists like Miles Davis, for example. He said, I'm not playing jazz music. Jazz means nigger music. They wouldn't let us be in classical orchestras because we were black, so we had to play as classically trained musicians in these other spaces. I'm not a jazz artist, and they still call him one. But I mean, how do you feel about like that whole concept? I mean,
if if an artist says that they are not something, then they are not that.
okay. And what about jazz being nigger music? Do you feel like he meant it in a negatively connotated way that you maybe don't receive the same way?
I mean, I never heard that quote. If if he felt that way during that time, I wasn't present during that time, but I could only kind of like symphony it with hip hop. How some people
Hmm.
aren't like hip hop artists, but in the contemporary, like if you black, they just put you in hip hop and rap, even if it's not that.
Okay.
Uh, that's what I would think. But I think with a lot of artists, if we see them as one thing, usually it's because of our limited exposure to uh, like Miles Davis could have been like, he could have said, I don't know, like a sculpture art, I sculpt sound, if the
Yeah.
artist, if the artist says that, for me personally, kind of like, I was about to say something so left field.
It's all right because it
Kind of,
sounds like you're exercising cultural humility here, which is crazy to me.
uh,
I know, isn't that
it's
wrong?
like, no,
I'm
it's
not
like,
him. I wasn't there. He had a different perspective as a black man during that time. I mean, that's what it's about.
yeah, because uh if people can identify as whatever they want to identify as,
Unicorns. Hmm.
yeah, just the same. One of my favorite artists, Lawrence Weiner, he does the
Hmm.
text-based works. He considered himself a sculpture artist, sculpting
Hmm.
spaces and stuff like that, even though it's not physical, it's not like protruding out, but he
Hmm.
considered himself that. And you know I feel like the same with pronouns. If that's how the artist wants to identify, like when people ask me what it is that I do, for the sake of just like quick understanding, I just say, okay, I write, create video, I have discussions, discourse,
Hmm.
painting. I don't quite know what I do. That's why my undergraduate thesis, I just put I make stuff on
Yeah,
the
and I
cover.
laugh every time I see that, but it's real. Yeah,
I
it's
make
true.
stuff. I wouldn't put myself under a blanket yet. I wouldn't put myself under. an umbrella. I feel like that kind of places limitations on me, but I do feel like I'm a producer of things. Like I don't quite
Yeah, and
know.
I think you should stick to that. I don't think you need to place yourself under anything because it can hurt you in the long run, especially if you build fan base and you try and switch it up, and then it's like when Drake first rapped and everyone hated it. I mean, it took him a good minute. I don't even like Drake. He's a plagiarist, but I'm just saying, like, no offense, that's your boy. That's cool,
No, I just
Oh, I was
no,
gonna
I
say,
no, I think similar to Cardi B, I think that Drake is I think he's an excellent vessel.
yeah, for
He's an
sure.
excellent vessel. I think he's an excellent. Not everybody has that quality or skill.
Yeah, they like programmable machines.
It's it
But
works.
Cardi is real about it though. She
Yeah,
keep
but
it 100.
she do. But that's what I'm saying. Like her and him and Cardi B, they're excellent examples of vessels. Like if you don't want to be
Mhm,
on the main stage, if you're a great writer or you're a great choreographer, and you're like, oh, like it's kind of like a director. Like you ever see
mhm,
directors and they classic example would be like Tim Burton and Johnny Depp. Tim
mhm.
Burton wants to be Johnny Depp so bad.
Oh
He
yeah,
was he
it
wants
will
to be
never
Johnny
happen.
Depp
There's
so
only
bad.
one to him because he's actually like that. If you meet him in real life, he's literally just literally like that.
Yeah. So
So
wait, Tim Burton or Johnny Depp?
Johnny Depp. I
Okay,
ain't never met
yeah,
no Tim Burton. I probably never will.
yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of directors who cast people um they see them as the perfect vessel to like exercise, their imagination.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's okay. That's cool. You could be a vessel. Yeah, these are the things that I'm thinking about right now. And I'm I told someone I'm just uh I'm illuminating what already is. It's already here.
Yes. You just need to figure out what is your objective besides conversation and helping people realize, this is nothing new. Only thing that's new is our phones or whatever. Like what did Will Smith say? The only thing that's new is the way we survey everyone, right?
You know
Um,
what it is? Whenever I say niggas or I'm talking, even if I'm in a crowd of people, there are a couple of people, 1, 5, 10, who look up. It's like a Batman signal or something. No, I'm serious.
I get it. That's just crazy.
Like you ever be in a room, somebody say something, and you just, oh, they're talking to me. I often find that um, people where nigga is projected onto them, or it's like a
Hmm.
designation, right? Even if they identify as that, but if somebody is
Hmm.
designating them as that and projecting it, they're already excluding them from certain conversations, and they're
Hmm.
already kind of like redlining them out of spaces, discussions, things, resources.
Hmm.
By me saying the N word, I have a desire to include. And I feel like by me using the N word, I'm
Hmm.
including people who wouldn't otherwise be included in the conversation. I could say Black, I could say African American, I could say a
Hmm.
part of the diaspora, I could say the global majority.
Hmm.
All of those do not hit the same as when I'm on stage and I'm like, yeah, me and my niggas was, ooh, what did she say? And then
Hmm.
all of a sudden, people are like tuned in. They're not like off somewhere zoning off because she
Hmm.
keeps saying the N word. She keeps talking to me. And after this, I want to see what my niggas is on. Like, what are they talking about?
Hmm.
For me, that's something that continues to come up to include niggas that are typically left out of the conversation. I'm not talking about
Hmm.
Black people. I'm talking about niggas. And someone was like,
Hmm.
well, what are niggas? Which is also one of the question in my thing to see if they had an example. For me, niggas know exactly who they are. They'll
Hmm.
stand up, they'll look up. When something odd happens in the room and all of a sudden you have eye contact because you guys are like speaking to each other energetically.
Trying to figure out if y'all need to get up and bounce.
Well, and so kind of like Greg Tate talks about music of it's an energy when he talks about Black music, it's something that
Hmm.
has to do somatically. You can't quite you can't quite describe it, which is why every page is filled with 20 songs, because you can't quite describe it, but you can provide examples. And so I think I'm in this space right now where I can't quite describe it, but I can continue to give you examples. At the very end of the survey, it says, is there an image that you would associate X, Y, and Z, memes, screenshots, whatever? It's posed as a question, but it's required. And it's fascinating, the images that people are uploading, because there's no other way to describe this image outside of just like technically what's going on, like what's in the image, but there's no way to describe it outside of like energetically, it is what it is. This is why you can scroll on TikTok and I could share a meme with you and you laugh. I share with somebody else, they're like, I don't really get it. It's because they're not a nigga. They would never understand that. They haven't been in that element. They don't know what it smells like. They don't know what it sounds like. They don't know how it moves. A lot of niggas have nigga telepathy. What is that? And or not even, I guess I could ask, what is that? But I'm more so just kind of like illuminating and including. I want to include niggas. I want niggas to know that they are welcome, and that they are seen, because there are people who, they are part of the intersectionality club of Black and niggas. Okay. If that was the intersection, I'm glad I'm saying this, because I could actually make street signs. It's Black and nigga, and that's my intersectionality. Black folks and niggas, and oftentimes it's excluded out of the conversation. And I feel like I should be able. I'm going to use it in my text. Just imagine you're reading, and all of a sudden the writer's just interchanging between African American, Black, and niggas, and you're trying to figure out, does this all mean the same thing? But it doesn't, because if it did, we'd only use one of them.
Yeah.
If it all meant the same thing, then when I walk into a room, if I call somebody Black, they wouldn't be like, I'm African American. Then you call somebody African American, they're like, nah, nigga, I'm Black. But even in that same sentence, it said, nah, nigga, so they already designated you as a nigga. It's just like, how did they know? So then that's a whole nother conversation. It's like, okay, well, who is a nigga? Some people may identify, some people may completely oppose. And my frustration, I perhaps feel sometimes, is just because you oppose to being a nigga doesn't mean that there's somebody in here who doesn't identify as that.
And you want to help them have a voice to be willing to also openly identify as that as well, right?
Yes, because they do. And whether people are joking or not, there's a lot of people who are actually being honest and they're identifying as nigga, because I'm confident that if they could on, that's why they make a drop-down menu. Because like someone was filling out a form for the school that I'm at, and they had all these pronouns. I was like, this is like, there's like 30 different, what is this? But the drop-down menu also is very limiting. So despite all the inclusive terms that they have on there, let's just say there's like 25. There is no option for other, and there's no option for none. So either you choose or you don't choose. So you may not feel included. So even with like racial identity, I can't blankly say there's no other, but I know that a lot of Black people think it's funny, but there's some truth to the fun bits where they're like, oh, I'm gonna identify as white, or I'm gonna identify as a nigga. I've heard this in conversation. You can identify as white because the assumption is you might get the interview or you might have access to more resources. You put nigga because on one hand you do identify as nigga, but also you feel like, why can't I have play? Why can't I play with this like survey or whatever?
Everybody else does.
Because they be putting white.
Asian people putting white European now, and they're not even from that continent.
You got Hispanics putting white. You got Indians putting white.
Yeah. And I'm not talking about the white Hispanics either. That's different. No, they mark Hispanic, which is crazy on my survey at least. And then I asked them about it, and then there was one lady who was Italian, and she said, oh, well, I'm from Southern Italy. We're not white people. The white people came from Europe on Northern Italy, and we're different. And I said, so Italy's not in Europe? Because you called them Europeans, but you said you're Italians. And then she just froze and looked at me. And then she
What's
told me she wishes she was Black because then she can get a book published. But go ahead.
what are your thoughts, however, on I have a theory that whiteness, like Blackness, is limited to America. And I think when you leave America, because you've been conditioned to see things as black and white, people who are not actually white are just labeled as that because they still have like lots of colonial similarities. But like the people here, I use white because I'm from America, but I see them as like European. I see them as like Swedish, British, German, X, Y, and Z, with the capacity to exercise what I've also experienced in America through whiteness.
I agree. And I honestly, and I'm gonna say this, and I don't mean to look, don't be looking at me sideways when I say this. But I think that those white people are also displaced and confused in the same way that we are. And we all live here together and having a multicultural displacement at the same time. The only difference is, they took over the land. Because like you said, when I talk to people who aren't from the United States, they don't say white or black. I have to force them to give me a color identifier, if even they will do it.
Yeah.
They'll say Venezuelan American. They'll use all the Africans said that they were raised to say country first and then nationality as it relates to their citizenship second. They don't even use color.
I think color is an American thing. I don't actually think it's like a
white people made it up. Yes, that's a joke too.
I know.
See, you get it. See?
Yeah, cause at first I was like, wait, and then I was like, I immediately thought, but that's not right.
Whoever created racism, that genius person was smart enough to know that if they made things based in color, it'd be easier to group enslaved peoples. That's what I think.
Yeah. No, literally, there's actually a really good text. I wish I could find it. It was I wasn't a huge fan of the course, but there was a really good text. What was her name? Joanne
Staton?
Yeah.
Yes, Joanne.
There's a really good text in the course that she had, and it talked about like the beginning, like the brainstorming before slavery, shadow slavery, the transatlantic slave trade, before it actually became a thing. We were reading a text on, I wish I knew what text it was. We were reading a text on like the ideation period of it. So how long people were meditating on it and creating these theories that weren't based in truth before it actually became something to actually execute. And I thought that was such a fascinating text that we kind of like, we discussed, but like glazed over, and people were getting frustrated. And I had never read a text like that because usually the text that we read, slavery is already a thing. But this is like, this is predating American slavery. This is predating shadow slavery. This is just a discussion that's being had where people are trying to figure out how do we make people believe this. And I just thought that was so fascinating, because they really said these darker skinned people are like lesser than us, and that's not true, but it worked.
It did. And from my research standpoint as like a person in literature, and my whole dissertation is about narratives and storytelling, I'm researching those individual stories that they printed on paper and passed around as a way to help with that ideology. So like the Bible, right? They had the Hamitic hypothesis. Have you heard of this?
What is that?
So the Hamitic hypothesis was this way that they kind of took the story of Ham from the Christian Bible and they said, look, Ham's son was cast to the dark shadow place. That's Africa.
Okay.
And God took their humanity for not listening to their father. So they're no longer humans. So these Black Africans are descendants of him. So when you enslave them, they're not human. So don't feel bad. And they basically use that story in the Bible to justify mistreating these shadow people that God cursed. And that's just one story. There's a lot of them. Like there's a lot of like literally, and this is all you can find all this information. You can read these stories, it's crazy. Or even like Joseph Conrad's The Heart of Darkness, when he says, the Africans had heads in their chest, and sharpened teeth and all this stuff. He was actually in Africa. He knows that their heads weren't in their chest. You ain't never seen nobody that looked that way. But he was the person on the expedition. He showed everyone. He said, "Hey, look, this is what I found. I found non-humans in Africa, in the heart of darkness." And he called it darkness because that scares people. Because Africa's not dark. The sun come out. It's not like they're in Greenland or something where it's like darkness for 40 days. So if you want me to send you some of those texts, I can send you the links.
Yes, send me. You know what I think about? When you said shadow people, I thought I got to find the video so I can share it with you. Kendrick Lamar performed and he was singing, he was dancing, but his shadow was right behind him dancing while he was rapping.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like that's so iconic. I read Toni Morrison's Whiteness and the Literary Imagination, Playing in the Dark.
Mm-hmm.
And she talks about the word darkness and how in the white imagination, how it synonymizes itself with Black people to be like
Mm-hmm.
this, like, and sometimes I think, let me backpedal. You live in a house, if your mom or your dad always calls you stupid, at some point you really just think that you're incapable of doing things. You think that you're stupid, you start to believe it, you start to internalize it. It's been 18 years. And then maybe you have a breakthrough and you realize those are just words, I can actually do anything, or you don't have a breakthrough and you just really go throughout life thinking you can't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
I have a theory that Black people were labeled as darkness, gross, and disgusting, XYZ for such a long period of time that even with the word nigga, you calling niggas niggas for centuries. My thing is what did you think was going to happen? Did you think you were just going to continue to say that and nothing be birthed?
Mm-hmm.
Did you think? And so sometimes I think, like I told my friend, I feel like I'm an avenger for niggas because I think that if we're always having to take the high road, we always have to turn the other cheek, it's suggested heavily. But what if niggas started playing in the shadows?
Mm-hmm.
What if they started playing, like, when I think of like spirituality and I think of God within self, when I start thinking about like meditating, I start thinking of how often Black people are gaslit into thinking that they can't react.
Mm-hmm.
So someone socks you in the face and your immediate reaction is to, but then you're trapped. Like you can't do anything. So Black people are just, I imagine Black people are just kind of like in this, like spiritually, energetically, you're just kind of like, what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
So to release some of that tension, you become a poet, you become a writer, you dance, you rap, you play a sport because you can't hit anyone back. And I like the idea. I like the idea of violence. I'm not even gonna cap.
Okay.
I
Like
like
physical violence or all violence?
however niggas see fit.
Okay.
And oftentimes when I'm thinking about these things, I start to feel bad, sad, and guilty for thinking that way because it's so violent. But be fucking for real. Imagine reading a book, someone's memoir on how they were being abused of a loved one. You're gonna be like, and then I give you the tools and resources and say, for Black people, my question is, what would you do if there were no repercussions for your actions?
We will be white.
Welcome. Welcome to the land of no repercussions for your actions. And I
There's some
think,
truth to what you're saying, though. Like, if you want to put that in the data, don't forget when in the South Africa apartheid, when they were having those trials for people who did horrible things to black people, those white people, they said, hey, no repercussions. All we want you to do is come to court and confess your crimes. You will not be put in prison. And they actually had a better desegregation process because of it, because there was accountability held. Whether they went to jail or not wasn't even the issue. And all those white people came out and confessed their crimes and cried about it. And they cohabitated with those black people as best as possible. They wasn't killing each other no more, though. Look into it. I'm not making
okay,
this up.
okay, yeah.
You'll see. It's crazy
I
though.
I
I don't
think,
know how you feel about that though.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think that everyone just is like angry, but I feel like the more I learn, it it's destabilizing. And I feel like the only way Black people can stabilize themselves is if they
Mhm.
activate themselves.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You ever see that show, uh Jordan Peele came out with one, and then it was on Amazon. It was called like, it was about the Black family that moved into Compton.
Oh yeah, I saw that. That was wild.
Okay. You
Them,
remember
they, something like
them?
that.
Yeah. You remember the scene where she's at home, the Black mom, she's at home, she's waiting on her husband, and they have that baby in there, and
Mm-hmm.
those white people randomly come up and start playing with the baby till the baby die.
Mm-hmm.
When I seen that scene, it made me realize that there's even more. That's when I came up with that question: what would I do if there were no repercussions for my actions? Because it made me realize, no, for real, white people did not have to be held accountable for how they treated Black people. Like, they really did not. Like, they could do
Mm-hmm.
anything, like anything, like quite literally. Like, you ever have like intrusive thoughts? You're like, whoa, where'd that come from? And then you
Mm-hmm.
kind of pivot and get back to sanity.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have to pivot.
Yeah.
Pivoting is like a new concept for a lot of white people. Like, not allowing their intrusive thoughts to win is like a totally new concept, if
Mm-hmm.
it's even being practiced at this point in time by some people. And so,
You
because
sound
of,
like you got a whole theory going here.
I just don't know how to put it into written words.
Nigga theory. You do know how
Nigga
to put it
theory.
in written words because you're talking to me. And if you were recording voice to text, it'd be written. So don't do that to yourself.
Okay.
Think about
I'm,
it like that.
I guess like organize it.
And I didn't mean to cut you off. My fault. I was just thinking like out loud. My bad.
Yeah, I think this is also why I record everything, because
Oh, I see.
this is why.
So organizing it, listen, it starts with the main premise and the objective, which is why I asked you that first. Then I asked you a question you're trying to answer. That's the second step, but you don't know. So that's fine. I skipped over that. The third thing I asked you was, what is your objective for like the viewer, or what do you want people to take away? And you kind of had a conversation about Black agency, niggas in the room responding to that word and sort of having that telepathy and so on and so forth. So it seems like you want to bring that to the light so that those people have a safe space. You said yes. So you have a goal. And then the final thing I'm telling you is that's it. That's how it works. You just went through the whole process of organizing the theory. I just asked you the questions in the order.
Hmm.
So you need to start off, just bullet points are easy. Then you start off by deciding if you want to use technical terms or not, or if you want to coin your own terms.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, if you coin your own terms, it's even easier because then you don't have to cite anything besides the history. That's the context. For real. You won't have a footnote or nothing like that. You made it up. Just like psychoanalysis, they made it up. They just took psyche and analyzing it and said, oh, psychoanalysis. It's not even that clever. It's just a word bling.
Mm,
You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
that's true.
I don't know
Okay.
if that's useful, but I mean, you
It is.
that's what you need to do. Just start with the list. When you watch the video back, take the notes that are helping you find out what your main questions are, because you can't do a dissertation without a question.
Oh,
Yeah, I
that's
know it
so.
sucks, but you can't.
It's not that it sucks. I just I've really been looking for it.
How can we unlock Black niggas' agency and help them better understand how to navigate spaces in their true essence? I don't know. It's anything. Maybe not essence. Maybe you don't like the word essence. I know you're kind of sensitive to language, but
I like people will be talking and literally though as they're talking, I'm like imagining definitions popping up. I'm like, I don't think that I I don't
you're an
know.
existentialist. This is an existential thing that you're trying to answer. You're trying to help people unlock their true potential as human beings. Whether they're niggas or not, you're just using that lens, and through that lens, other people might also unlock their true inner selves by looking at the process of you helping other niggas figure out how they want to exist. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
So I think it also might help if you also emphasize that, yeah, it's for niggas, but it's not for niggas. It's for the earth to move a step forward in an actual way, in a true sense, instead of hiding behind walls and shades of political correctness. Because sometimes political correctness can maybe be politically incorrect. If you can't walk in and say niggas, but they identify as that, now we're leaving a group out. Isn't that against the point?
Yeah, no. I actually that's so true because I remember I went to see Soul of a Nation, and then I also went to art and practice. There was an installation up. You know what I noticed in gallery and museum spaces? It's okay for me to see works where Black people are like, oh, call me a nigga, they call me a nigger, and this was so depressing, and oh my gosh, I was so just offended by this.
Mm-hmm.
But if I come in the room and I say I love my niggas for real, I ride with my niggas all day.
Mm-hmm.
I love real niggas. If I just say anything, all of a sudden the law of proximity is lost. All of a sudden, context doesn't matter and they only see the N word. But it's because I've activated the word. I'm not trying to deactivate it. So there's people, it seems like the word is only supported when people are deactivating it. Especially when Black people are deactivating it, which ironically, like I said earlier, white people got that word activated, Mexicans got it activated, everybody got it activated. But when a Black person comes in and a person who doesn't mind being like, yeah, I'm a real nigga, they come in and they start activating it, all of a sudden it's like their power levels are getting too high. I made a post on Instagram that says, I could whoa is me, or I could whoa, it's me. And people were like, because they don't mind if I come in there sulking. Do you know who Carlos Martial is?
Yes.
Did you see their latest work?
No. Should I?
I'm gonna just show you on the screen really quick.
Is it good or bad? I can't tell.
I don't think that I am the person to say whether or not anything is good or bad, but I can have a discussion about what I'm looking at.
That tells me all I need to know, though.
Talk about cultural humility.
That's okay.
Did you see it?
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
Look, I can whoa it's me, where I can whoa, it's me.
Yeah, but something like that though, I don't see the point. There's enough real photography for that, in my opinion, to not really be art.
This looks like it was a performance, and I was scrolling unprovoked. Talk about what's that word you use? Trauma for PhD.
The trauma response.
Talk about trauma inducing. I'm scrolling, minding my own business on Instagram, and I see this naked Black man with a noose around his neck, with 4 white presenting people carrying this man, looking up at him like he is God.
No, I get you. Now, with that energy that you have and all the cultural humility you're practicing here, for your dissertation, hypothetically, I mean, you could even think about like, okay, what if you set up 2 art spaces and one is the woe is me and then one is the woe is me, and then you have just a button that said did I enjoy my experience or not, or a survey, and then you could actually in a live sense get data on people's comfortability or lack thereof when the N-word is presented in 2 different spectrums within the art space.
Oh, collect that and use it as data.
Yeah, that would be a form of it. Even if you just had a happy face and a frowny face button when people walked in and out the different exhibitions, are people going to click this I like this button when it's a bunch of sad stuff like that? That's ridiculous. Versus when you say, hey, this is my nigga Chad and I love him, are they going to say, hey, this is wrong? Why are you using the word like that in this sense? Can it only be used in pain and torment? I mean, you could document that easily.
This
And
is
that
a
would
great
also help
example.
to the point of, like we talked about in the beginning, those roadblocks you might experience because of the word itself.
This is a great example. I'm going to test this theory before winter break. I'm
I'm
gonna
just
do
saying
that.
that's real. And I've seen bad versions of this. I had a white experimental psychology professor at Howard. He was
Mm-hmm.
horrible.
Oh.
So one day I challenged him. I was like, dude, like, because he kept failing my exams, but when I would go to his office and say, well, what answer is wrong? He would say, well, none of them are wrong. I feel like they're not thought out enough. And I'm like, well, if none of them are wrong, how did I fail? And I look at him. So I said, well, what is your PhD in? Obviously, it's in psych. What'd you do for your research? So he pulls it up. This dude, just hear me out. He put a black man in a suit behind bars and asked people, is this a lawyer or an inmate? And then he put a white dude in a suit behind bars and said, is this a lawyer or an inmate? Then he did the same thing with them in pedestrian clothes. I'm like, that's trash. You already know everyone's gonna say the black dude is an inmate. And like, is that research? No.
Yeah.
Like you said earlier, we already know a lot of this stuff. It's not really research. That's not research.
Yeah. You know what I realized too with that example, with that experience that you had? I feel like I had a similar experience. I feel like people are weaponizing when people see that you produce a certain level or quality of work, even if you don't
Mm-hmm.
submit it to them. Say, for example, another professor shared what you were working on. It's like, wow, this is really
Mm-hmm.
good. Then you show up to their classroom and they have an expectation that, you know, that's how you'll show up in that class.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they weaponize you against yourself because that's happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I got an email that said, oh, I just feel like you can explore this more.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best
That's
written
not on the
paper in this
rubric,
class.
though.
That no, I had him resend the rubric because I'm like, I think I'm aligning.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, I read your thesis. This is not the thesis class.
Yeah.
This is not that class. I don't care what you read. Everybody read it. It's in my
Mm-hmm.
signature in my email. Of course you read it, but that's not what I'm submitting today. This
Yeah.
is a reflection. 10 points. Be for real.
Mm-hmm. But I think
Weaponize.
that's a part of this whole thing that you're bringing up, though, with like people's comfort or discomfort with the woe is me situation. I think it's very similar. I think the difference is it's not a one-to-one interpersonal relationship. There's a group of people and they came here to see what I'm presenting. They came here for me because
Mm-hmm.
they're interested or they think that they are because of the title of the exhibition, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely think you should explore that. Even if when you're in the space, you do the niggas test with the Batman light. Just
Yeah.
in the space, just to see how people react and if that might change if they liked or disliked their experience. I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah. I have to figure out what the I have to step outside of myself to
Just
make
throw
a
your hat up. And no, I'm
yeah.
just joking.
No. I have to challenge I have to really step out of myself to make a woe is me piece. Because I'm so I'm anti those for myself to produce. Other
Yes,
people want
but
to
you're a
produce.
researcher, so it's like separate the art from the artist. You have a goal and a purpose, and you're trying to get that degree. So,
That's so
that's
true.
I'm trying to help you conceptualize, the scenario so that they don't just decline you and say this is going to promote racism or this is unethical or, all the BS that you're probably going to be challenged with, maybe, possibly.
That's so
If you have
true.
all this stuff, it's so critical that there's no way that they will have anything to deny you with.
Mm, mm,
Like you said, you need data. This is all data driven.
mm,
It'd be
mm-hmm.
different if it was only qualitative because then so like you said, you saw that image on your feed and it traumatized you a little bit. And that's
It
that same
trump
argument they're gonna make about the N word. It
I
is.
I I sent this text. I sent it to one of my friends. He's a painter. I'm about to see what I responded with. He said, "This was on Instagram." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Can you forward this to me?" I said, "Yeah." And I said, hold on, let me see what I said. Let's see. I said, "This had me pondering. Do I have to hang myself to get paid?" And I sent this picture of Michael Jackson.
Oh, dang, why you doing that? You doing that, man?
I said, "Had me pondering. Do I have to hang myself to get paid?" He said, "LMFAO." He said, oh, then we start talking about other paintings. But yeah, because I'm like, then they knew that was trauma inducing. They turned the comments off. I couldn't even leave a comment. And I'm good for leaving comments on them little art pages. I'd be kind of scared sometimes. I'm like, I just know they're going to come back like Suni Mullen.
Well, how about this? And then I have another meeting, so I'm going to leave you with this.
Okay.
All right? And then you let me know when you're ready to meet again, when you got some stuff thought out. But if you are resistant to that type of work, then make it your own. What would happen if they were all Black people and it was a white person? But what would happen if you did an exhibition where you took images like that from famous artists and did a polar swap on the skin color and just basically swapped the races and did a whole exhibition and reference their art and even maybe even put pictures of their art next to yours and say in response to the great whoever that is, whoever the person is.
Yeah. This
because
is leading,
they're in museums and stuff.
They are.
And, just like racism is like a telephone. I mean, obviously it's an issue of power and systemic issues, but it works both ways, which is why reverse racism is not real. Because once all the Black people get the power, we can oppress white people too in certain places. We're not doing it now, but the world could have been different.
Before we go, on the left, in my brain universe, I believe in racism and Black people can perpetuate it.
Not today.
For the same period of time that white people perpetuate it.
You said we cannot?
No, I believe in it, and I believe Black people can perpetuate it for as long as white people perpetuated it to us.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's fine. Well, the words evolve too, so this original definition is not even how it functions now, in the same way that freedom of speech was designed before we had internet and phones.
Yeah.
There was dudes standing on boxes, reading papers, like without megaphones. There was only in their city. You had to get on a horse and go somewhere else to speak to something. Like, it's different. So I get you. I'm not saying you're wrong. I feel it.
I'm gonna have to edit that out this video.
I mean, it's your video too. You gonna edit yourself, but you're gonna go out saying niggas. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Some ideas, I don't know if I'm prepared to say them publicly just yet. I'm still inching. And
like you said, you don't have to. You could just make a painting. You could write a poem, like you said. You don't have to say everything. Maybe you're understanding them more than you might think. Okay. But I ain't trying to do you like that. I'm just saying.
I'm gonna re-listen to this next week. I'm gonna write some things, and then I'm meeting with my director next week, and she's gonna read over the paragraph too. But it seems the consensus so far is very similar to what you're saying. Okay. So I'm glad I started doing the research or collecting my own data, because I think that's imperative. So I'll look into the people that you mentioned, and then rework some things and try to include these numbers and see what I come up with. I need a succinct 1,000 words.
Yes. So just let me know when you're ready. Shoot me an email and we can talk again. All right.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate this.
All right. No worries. Catch you later.
Bye.